Welcome to Melanin Mythos. We are an all BIPOC world building podcast that hopes to create a space for the BIPOC community to discuss world building. So tune in bi weekly on Fridays for new episodes. Melanin Mythos is brought to you by Apochromatic Unlimited, a collaborative collective working to raise the voice of POC creators in the TTRPG space. Today, our guest is Connie Chang. Connie, using they, he, she pronouns, is a trans Chinese American writer, director, producer, game designer, Emmy award winning game master, and creator of Transplanter and all trans POC led dark fantasy TTRPG channel with presentations that include Second Stranger, Godkiller First Blood, and the Chaos Protocol that recently wrapped Arc 2, and the even more recently filmed First of Its Kind and Class Godkiller Last Hope, an in-studio AP series premiering June 29th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube and Twitch, starring Connie as the GM and the one and only C. Thomas as Godkiller. Directed by Zoel, using Connie's own TTRPG system, Godkiller First Blood, an Ashcan release that is available on itch.io and part of the incredible TTRPGs for Palestine bundle.
That was amazing just to hear. Holy shit. Oh no, Connie.
Those are a lot of words.
I can't hear you.
What a blurb, what a spiel.
Hey,
I know. Amazing.
Holy crap, that was so cool. There's so much stuff.
was that the whole thing? Is that all we got? Is just we just read Connie's bio and then call it an afternoon, call it an evening?
We
Or
could
do we
do
got more
that.
often?
I also like frogs. Maybe that should be in there. I'm a frog lover.
Oh man, let's add it to the lore. Let's add it to the official lore chart.
Was speaking of lore chart, where would you start if there is if you were going to put frogs into Godkiller?
Frog killer. You have to
Frog.
kill the ultimate frog who rules over the entire pond.
Oh,
I like this. I think we're off to a strong start for this interview. I think we're headed in the right direction. But I think all of us are super thrilled and excited to have you back again. I know it's been a little bit. I just wanted to ask, how do you deal with so much buildup over something? How do you such suspense for your own work? Aren't you pressurized? I would be the hole that would be worn through the floor of my apartment. I paced through the wall. You know what I mean? How's that?
Honestly, I'm too busy, I think, to fixate on the pressure of Last Hope coming out as Transplanter's first ever in-studio venture. There's so much work that always has to be done constantly, and Transplanter as a channel, we're a very indie, very small in terms of the amount of people who work on it full-time endeavor. It's just me and Z, and we run everything. I'm the GM and the showrunner. C's the dramaturg and producer. Between us, we manage all of the administration, all of the marketing, all of the production, all the video production, the content creation, not to mention just all of the creative stuff that goes into all of our shows. We direct, we perform, we edit, and not to mention the sponsor relations as well, the financing side of things, the development side of things. All of this stuff keeps us very well busy and very well occupied. So there's a time for us to be insecure, I guess, because time is money, yes, but also it's important, and I've learned to spend my time really intentionally in ways that fuel me. And something I like to say, because it is true, it is my truth, is that believing in myself and loving myself is not a luxury. It is a necessary survival tactic in a world that very much wants people like me dead and gone and erased and marginalized. So this idea of trans joy, of queer joy, right, of the joy of being a queer Chinese American person, feels every aspect of what I do and how I'm able to do it. And of course, there are dark days. Of course, we all have dark days and we all have ups and downs. But that is kind of my North Star. That's kind of the guiding light that I hold on to. That and the support and love of my community, my chosen family, and the people around me who who believe in my vision and believe in my work.
Yeah, I think
powerful.
there's something to be said for convictions, like having that to dig into, which is a recurring theme in your work in Godkiller. I notice is how far you're willing to go in the pursuit of your well, you know it better than I do, of course, but how you can choose these different oppositional paths and the lengths you're willing to go to. And I like in as I was reading it how you pointed out the setting or the cradle responds to your actions as a whole, and when you when you commit to taking power and all that entails, how the environment responds, which is I think it shows in your work, and I think it's something to be proud of. And it is not only is it a survival tactic, it is survival advantage. It is the right mindset to have in a world that doesn't care about you.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, and I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of the game system that we're using for Last Hope, for First Blood, and that I released the Ashcan of last year, and I'm currently working on the full version of with Evil Hat Productions, Godkiller. The spirit of that game is very much collaborative, which is kind of funny because the way I pitch it, like the log line, the elevator pitch for it is Godkiller is a holy punk duet game for one game master, God, and one player, the Godkiller, which implies that the player ends up killing the game master, right? Either like metaphorically or literally, which makes it feel like a adversarial game, right? Like, oh, it's like the player versus the GM, right? The player wants to kill the gods, the GM controls the gods. Obviously, there's going to be some tension and friction there, right? But I think kind of ironically, it's the opposite is the case in terms of the design philosophy that is going into the creation of the game, as well as every piece of technology, every mechanic, every rule that I write, every move, every origin that I devise pushes forward a collaborative ideology and a collaborative methodology for playing the game. And how I define collaborative is that it's not intrinsically, Godkiller is not about winning or losing. It's about working together as equals, creative equals at the table, to weave a creatively fulfilling story. And in terms of what creatively fulfilling means for Godkiller, it means exploring the overarching themes of the game, which are mortality, divinity, monstrosity, power, violence, devotion, and choice, in conversation with the unique emergent conflicts of your particular Godkiller and your particular cradle, because every table's main character and setting is going to look different. So the core question of the game isn't, are you strong enough to kill the gods around you? You always are. The only barrier to being able to kill a god in terms of the mechanics of the game is if you know their downfall and if you're confronting them in their true form. That's it. That's it. Like, that's all you need. There's no AC. There's no specific numbers of damage you have to deal. That's it. Because it's not about power scaling. The core dramatic questions for the game are, which gods will you kill? Which gods will you spare? And how will those decisions as the Godkiller shape the fate of the cradle forever? It's about having power and wielding it responsibly or irresponsibly and dealing with the consequences that you create for yourself, in conversation with the kind of tale you're trying to weave with your GM. So very strongly, I believe, and this is a thesis statement that I put forward in the design of the game, that power in and of itself does not corrupt. It reveals. It reveals who you are. What you do with your power shows yourself and shows the world around you exactly what kind of person you are. And you can use it to tell a story about violence and about, gratuitous cruelty, or you can use it to tell a story about finding hope at the bottom of a well, right? I'm interested in providing the tools for you to do whatever you want with, but the spirit of the game is very liberational. The only wrong way to play Godkiller is to play it like a fascist.
I have one thing to add, and then I'm gonna let it go so everybody can go. But you touched on power and liberation. And it brought to mind my favorite part of the design of the game after going through it. My favorite thing in the whole bit was something to the effect of, to manifest a miracle was relinquishing your power. Oftentimes this power that you've taken from somebody else. And so you said power and then you said liberation. I agree those are themes in the work that I noticed, and I thought that was so poignant and beautiful. And we actually did an Melanin Mythos episode on types of heroes, and the ones that I cherish are the ones that have to get to the precipice, and then you have to release that power and what that means. And I think it's probably, I imagine this kind of world building or collaborative world building can be very intimate storytelling, because we're talking about releasing power and then how that affects the rest of the environment around you. If anybody's ever had power in your life, and like the thesis you pose, what's power going to do to you when you have it? And it's evident in the work, and so I love it, and I think it deserves due praise, to be honest.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think that also hits on something that I feel very drawn to and compelled by as a storyteller, just as a whole, which is this idea of like a character wanting something desperately, but that thing that they want ends up being diametrically opposed to what they need.
Oof.
And like want and need being
Oof.
at odds, and
I love it. I love it so much.
And that's kind of like the core internal dramatic engine powering the main character of Last Hope, Litany, the titular Godkiller, who is dealing with a lot of like they are very driven. They have a very specific goal that is spoken out loud multiple times from the pilot episode. But it's kind of, we learn over the course of the 8 episodes that it's at odds with what they truly need in order to grow as a character and as a person.
I love it.
Okay, you said Last Hope. We're talking about Last Hope. Tell us about it. Tell us, like, okay, I have a question of like, when did this begin? Where and when did this whole thing begin?
I would say the seeds of Last Hope. It's so hard to track a beginning. Mm-hmm. I would say the exact vision for Last Hope came from the idea that I wanted to produce an in-studio show for Transplaner, because up until this point I've been in the AP space for like 4 years now, coming up on 4 years, and we've only ever recorded things remotely. We've only ever streamed remotely. We've never actually gotten in a room together and played before, and I so miss that, because those are my roots as a facilitator, as a GM. Is I cut my teeth in live in the flesh space, right? There's the urge of missing that. There was also the lot more immediately difficult obstacles of funding, because an in-studio show is a lot more expensive than a stream. You could get away with not paying anyone, including yourself, for a stream. You can't really do that. You can't really get away with not paying anyone for in-studio, because the space and the equipment, right? And especially if you're pre-recording, right? Like the cost is much higher. So things were really starting to coalesce for us, I would say, around Big Bad Con of 2023. I had some really good conversations with various industry folks in APs and beyond as well. A lot of people who are doing really cool stuff in studio. And it kind of became apparent. And, that was kind of like the final straw on the camel's back, where like the final puzzle piece that clicked into place. I was kind of getting to this conclusion on my own, but Big Bad 2023 really like helped solidify it. Like that in order for Transplaner, I think, to keep growing in the direction that I want it to grow in, we're going to have to do something different. And we're in a position now where we are able to have a little bit of funding from a few sponsors who believe in us to make this kind of work. And it's important to us that the work we make feels different from the other AP offerings that are out there, and feels distinct with its own like very special Transplaner voice, right? In terms of the stories that we're telling, the themes we grapple with, and in terms of how I think the production itself looks. So we worked with a technical director, Ryan Jabot, who comes from like music videos and like commercial projects. So he brought a very like really different outsider perspective to like outsider to APs to how Godkiller Last Hope would be shot. And that we really wanted to work with him because of that. He was also crucially local to the area to cut down on costs too. So we filmed this all like within like 30-minute drive of our house. And everyone else that we worked with, Zoe is our dramaturg. So we were able to work room in the budget for like a stipend for Zoe, and we covered their like food and travel expenses for them to get here. We had a couple of PAs work with us. John Riomasa worked as a BTS photographer, right? We paid them in like lunch and dinner, right? And because we operated, this entire thing was shot, filmed, produced, edited on a shoestring budget. C and I we didn't pay ourselves for this, to be honest. We paid other people and dug into our savings for this because we really believed in the vision and we really wanted, this is a labor of love. And in a lot of ways, Last Hope is also a proof of concept to kind of show people, like, once this is out, I really believe in the work we've made. Like, hey, look at what we can do, how much we can do, and how awesome it is with like peanuts, right? Look what we made on a shoestring budget. Imagine what else we could do if you gave us more money. If you supported us, gave us more of a platform, gave us more resources.
Oh man, that's so rad. I'm not gonna get into it because it's like a whole different conversation. But I think when I saw the trailer for Last Hope, I'm like, oh, yep, this is where the space is going next. Like, absolutely, this is where it's going next. Like I've been like noodling it in my head of like, we do actual play. And now we're adding production. I mean, are we going to go to actual play production? Is that the next step? Is that where we're at, where we are combining storytelling through games with this higher level, concepts? And I felt that when I was watching the trailer.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and it's been really amazing to see like the production and like the little snippets and the hints and the teasing juicy narrative bits resonating with people already. That means a lot, and C and I really we poured so much of ourselves into this show, and it's kind of mind-boggling to think it's 8 episodes, right? And each episode is like roughly an hour, so it's hopefully like friendly for people who have never seen an AP before. They're like, oh, that's like the same as like a drama series. I can sit down and like watch this 45 minutes or like 60-minute thing. But it's also mind-boggling to think that we shot 8 episodes, like an entire campaign. Basically, it's a mini series, but there's a beginning, a middle, and end. And especially for the character Litany, the Godkiller, like goes through an entire character arc in the span of 8 episodes, and we shot that in 3 days. So this was definitely the fastest AP campaign that I've ever been a part of, and it was a lot of cutting our teeth. It was a lot of like not touch and go necessarily, but like a lot of learning on the fly about the pacing, the production pacing of in-studio work that is really different from long-term remote work that I'm used to. Because for the Chaos Protocol for Second Stranger, it was like a weekly stream. So we had like a week to like think and talk and like scheme and like, be like, oh, I didn't really love the way I did that. What if I did this instead? Like week to week to week. And also on a game master side, I got to prep. I had like 6 days to prep between each session. I didn't get that for Last Hope. Like I had like a 30-minute break between each episode that we shot. And then I would be like, okay, what are we doing next episode? Okay. And like plot it out. So it was a great learning experience, and I'm excited to keep doing in-studio work.
Outstanding.
That's baller. Like I'm so impressed by the work you do. You've always been a couple steps ahead of like the rest of the space, in my opinion. Early on, you were the first one to say "fuck D&D." Like,
ever. No one else has ever said those words.
Nah, but Connie was the first one on the biggest stage. Like, yeah, fuck you, fuck y'all, fuck what you doing. So Connie's always been ahead of the game. I have a question. It's kind of a meta to the Last Hope.
Please, yes.
Storyteller. I have 2 questions, but one of them is real deep. First, about world building, and again, this is a world building podcast. I'm curious about not only the world you're building in the game, but also the world you're building now as Connie Chung and along with C, of course. When you build a world, you eventually have to leave a world behind. And I'm really curious about, what do you think, like, the legacy of the work you've done, the Last Hope it's coming out, the work you've done in Translator, what do you think about the legacy that you're going to leave behind? Kind of looking back at the work you've done and the work you might do in the future.
Yeah, that is a really great question. And a very big question too. I have to really chew on it. What I hope the legacy of everything I do in this space is an invitation and proof that storytelling and world building in TTRPGs can be an act of radical imagination that encourages us and forces us to create a better world that doesn't exist yet. So that is why I am drawn specifically to non-colonial and anti-Orientalist world building, because that doesn't exist in our current world. Our current world is is a white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal fucking mess. There is imperialism, there's colonization, there are so many problems created by and sustained by hegemony. I'm not so much interested in translating that one-to-one into a speculative setting as I am like freeing myself from the very carceral constraints of our current available modes of seeing and embracing ways of imagining and ways of seeing that do not yet exist, but I hope one day will. And world building as a practice of liberation, I think, for me as an artist, because in a world where everyone's trans, right, in a world where there's no racism, in a world where there's no colonization, in a world where there's no Orientalism, there's no xenophobia, the question becomes, well, what kinds of conflicts exist beyond conflicts that are informed by oppression, right? What kind of pain, what kind of sorrow, what kind of complicated villains, and what kind of very cathartic journeys can we go on that aren't marred, darkened, or most pivotally limited by our own understanding of what is possible for an oppressed or a marginalized person. It's very freeing for me to imagine worlds beyond transphobia, not as escapism, but as, again, liberation. And I think I am always trying to push beyond logics of representation and diversity with transplanar. Not that these things aren't important. They are very crucial. Diversity, inclusion, equity, representation, yes, 100%. And I support all of that unequivocally. What I mean by that is I think there's a reason why the term women's empowerment is non-threatening to capitalist patriarchy, but women's liberation is. Because you can empower a woman under capitalism. It's like girl boss, right? Like pinkwashing. Like, yeah, let's, like women can be militarist, like, imperialist murderers too. Like a black president can also bomb children across the globe, and I'm not interested in that so much as I am in fighting against assimilation. I'm not interested in assimilating into hegemony or having power so I can then turn around and pull the ladder up and dominate other people. I'm interested in like destroying the ladder in the first place, right? And I think that's not necessarily starts, but a fundamental part of that is the ideology of it, right? When we think about the different axes that oppression works on, interpersonal oppression is really easy to grasp because it's stuff like microaggressions, it's stuff like slurs, it's stuff like just, oh, this dude is straight up racist, right? And it's just like, oh, you're shitty racist neighbor, right? And institutional oppression, I think, is becoming more and more illuminated now, right? This idea that like, oh, the judicial system is like intrinsically fucked up, right? Is intrinsically anti-black, right? Is intrinsically
getting a lot bold,
transphobic.
It's as bold as it always probably should have been if they weren't lying to us the whole time. Yeah.
Right? And like, systemic oppressions I think are also really real. Internalized oppression too, right? This self-hatred that oppressed people have for ourselves, that sometimes we turn outward toward other oppressed people as well, right? We see these in like intra-community conflicts all the time, right? As an Asian American, as a Chinese American, I see this in the Chinese American space, like a lot. And I'm sure a lot of us here in this call can relate to that. There's also ideological oppression, right? And that is, I think, where the battlefield of artists really is we can help rewrite the culture around us as art with our art. And that's what I hope my legacy shows and can do, because at the end of the day, I'm a guy who's telling a story around a table with a bunch of other people. We're just like vividly hallucinating something that doesn't exist, right? Like that's what we do. And like people laugh, people cry, people like resonate with the work we do, which is a huge reason why I do it. But also by telling these silly little stories that don't exist or don't quite exist yet, we paint a picture of what could be possible. We paint a picture of a world where, racism doesn't exist, and that I think inherently threatens racism, because it shows that we can have a world that's better than the one we currently have. We don't have to settle, right? The question, people are like, when are things going to get better? When are things going to get better? Things are already better for me in these worlds that I'm making, and I'm trying to invite us to fight and struggle and survive for those worlds, because we can't fight if there's nothing to fight for. And I think as an artist, that's kind of my responsibility, is to imagine worlds worth fighting for.
What do you hope that world might look like? Like, again, radical imagination. Again, shout out to Zoe. Radical imagination. What do you think that world might look for? Like, you fought your fight. All the artists have come together. We've risen up, and we haven't taken power, but we've now shared whatever it is we need to share. What do you think that world might even look like? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I don't think there is one way it can look like, and I wouldn't want it to only look like one thing. I think that's part of it, because I think hegemony seeks to assimilate, and I think hegemony seeks to homogenize, perhaps. And I think that diversity is a strength. I think a diversity of perspectives, a diversity of backgrounds and histories is a strength, and a diversity of cultures as well. I think issues arise when one particular culture becomes dominant and seeks to exploit and subjugate others, right? So for me, a non-colonial, anti-Orientalist world, as evinced by the stories I tell in The Second Stranger, The Chaos Protocol, First Blood, Last Hope, is one where there is still conflict. There's a reason why I describe our work as dark fantasy, because it's dark. There are some pretty horrific things that happen in a lot of the stories. It's called Godkiller. It's not like God hold hands and sing a song, right? It's dark. It's horrific. There's gore. There is trauma. There is pain. There is death. There is vengeance. There are cycles of grief. There are people that do terrible things. And I think even in a world where we've broken past racism, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, that doesn't mean we've broken past pain, that we've broken past suffering even necessarily, that we've broken past sorrow and grief. I think those are just core emotions of a human experience, right? It's not a bad thing to feel grief. That means you've loved. It's not a bad thing to feel rage. That means you care and you've been wronged, right? And we are all capable of hurting other people and being hurt. And I think that the work I seek to create strives to honor that, but on an equivalent level where no one is, I think, inherently positioned in a way that their hurt like oppresses people on a mass scale, right? I think that's kind of where it crosses the line to colonization. And I do that by drilling really deep into very personal beef, basically, like really personal conflicts with each other, that then, because the more personal you get, the more specific you get, the more universal I think the emotions become. I very much believe as a storyteller, in the old saying, specificity creates universality, right? So like the more specific we get with our stories, like the more they can resonate, which is kind of diametrically opposed to what execs at Pixar are currently saying, right? About how like, we want our directors to stop seeking personal catharsis and go back to universally beloved stories, which is just code for like white people's stories, right? Because there's, whiteness elides itself, right? It pretends that it is a universal experience when it's really not, right? Which is why a lot of white people get really uncomfortable when they get pointed out as white, because for them, whiteness is the opposite of otherness. It is centered, it is unmarked. Whereas no, you are marked, you're just white. Right, like that's the marking on you. That's your otherness, and yet they're not other because they have the power.
Oh, sorry. I saw a movie recently because I was really depressed when I watched all the Pixar movies because I thought that made me feel better, and it didn't. But I saw a movie Onward, and it came out in 2020, right before the pandemic. Chris Pratt and Zendaya's boyfriend are the main characters, main voices, and it's like the most white. Like the stepdad's a cop and he's like really cool at the end. And like they're just two white guys living a magical fantasy life. And I'm like, this is so pre-2020. Like you can tell this came out right on the cusp of the change in society. But it was very much, and I compared it to, it made 124 million, and I looked at oh gosh, what's the movie, the Canadian Chinese panda?
Seeing Red?
Seeing Red.
Or Turning Red?
Turning Red, yeah. Jeez.
Seeing Red is really funny. She turns into a rage monster. Period.
Well, that's part of it, though. I mean, okay, sorry, that's a whole nother discussion.
But Seeing Red made 24 million. Onward made 124 million. And I was like, this movie was so white that everyone saw it, no matter how bad it was, no matter how bad the story was.
So that's another thing too, right? Which is why Last Hope for me is what I'm calling an unapologetically diasporic queer Chinese endeavor. Everything about it is super Chinese, right? I'm wearing hanfu in like every shot. There's Chinese lanterns. The battle map is a go board, right? There's like an altar on the table, right? I speak Chinese in it like a few times. The character designs, the world building is very Chinese. It's like my take on xianxia, which is a form of like Chinese high fantasy. It's a specifically Chinese form of understanding fantasy with like specifically culturally Chinese tropes around magic and around like heaven, hell, bureaucracy, like world building essentially. And I think that it's not that stories like Turning Red or Encanto or Soul are like difficult for mass audiences to relate to necessarily because the main characters are people of color or Black or Chinese or what have you. I think it's because we have been conditioned globally because of like cultural imperialism to consider whiteness and Western perspectives as universal. And I think it's going to require some discomfort and some active work on the side of white audiences and audiences who have not interrogated their own, like, I think, cultural assumptions. And you don't necessarily even have to be white, I think, to have a lot of those assumptions. It's going to take work on the viewer and the watcher and the audience and the fan side to think like, oh, I feel like I can't relate to this character. Is it because this character isn't relatable, or is it because I'm kind of racist right now? Right? Like I'm being so for real right now. Like I'm being, I mean this so seriously. And I think Last Hope, that's another legacy that I hope to leave behind is I've spoken to a lot of fans of Transplaner. I've spoken to a lot of people who listen to our work or watch our work, overwhelmingly other trans people, other queer people, and then other people of color as well. I think it's not really a shocker to say for me to show that our demographics show that like white dudes are the smallest like audience like demo for us, right? And I think it's probably because of the way we advertise ourselves. Like a white guy would be like, well, I'm not like a queer Asian woman. Like, why would I watch this thing? Chris Pratt's not in this. Why would I give a fuck? Right. But I think that says a lot less about our work and the value of our work and the universality of our work, and more about like that white guy who just won't give our work a chance. Right. To be quite frank.
There's something I think about a lot. In terms of like, I play video games. I'm sure other people do. You know. And you go into a game that is like the default, like you get a world builder, or like you can make your character, and the default is always just some white guy, like just always some white guy, just your default. I think about that a lot when I think back to back in the day when I was playing Mass Effect, and you know I can make Commander Shepard whatever the hell I wanted, and I made her a Black woman, and I'm like, this is badass. Where do I see this ever? I don't see it anywhere, and it's really obvious to me that like, whiteness is not like the concept of race is a white supremacist idea in itself, but what it wants to predicate itself on is the idea that we are the default, everyone else is kind of irregular, and it's very strange. It's very strange when you are born that way. I mean, we're all, you know, POC, so it's like we're just born irregular one way or another, and then some of us are queer, so you add on a bunch of things that really do make that stand out. So like kind of just speaking on the idea that how is it that our stories are seen as not marketable, it really is just because white people have accepted, or white supremacy has dictated that the default is this, and divergence is going to get you smacked on the back of the hand or something, you know?
Definitely. I mean, there's also something to be said about how I think Godkiller in particular isn't for everyone. And I did not try to make it for everyone. I very much live and die by the artistic screed of make your art for like yourself and like 30 other freaks, right? Like just like don't try to please everyone with your art, because you're not going to please everyone with your art, right? So like that's part of why like I market Transplaner and I create Transplaner with like the non-colonial anti-Orientalist world building lens in mind. But also even within that, our stories aren't for everyone. You know, our stories deal with really dark themes, sometimes dark and mature themes. We have a lot of deeply complicated characters. All of our PCs are flawed in deep ways, hurt other people and get hurt. There's no easy answer for they're good, they're bad. So all the good guys just come in and kill all the bad guys, and like, bam, like the problem is solved. Like that is never how any of our stories go ever. And I think that in and of itself is kind of our attempt at creating a non-colonial narrative arc, because I think this idea that there are easily categorized ideas of good and evil is inherently colonialist, because for me, a non-colonial world is one where there is room for complicated conflict, right? Conflict with each other. That doesn't mean you always have to shake hands and hug and like make merry with everyone at the end. Sometimes it means you fucking exile someone who has hurt a lot of people from your community. You fucking exile them, and who cares about what happens to them next? They've done a lot of harm, and they need to figure themselves out away from the people they've hurt, right? And sometimes that means, you know, you beat the shit out of someone because they're not going to listen otherwise. You just got to kick the shit out of this shitty person, and then maybe they'll learn. I'm so serious. Like
sometimes you do have to do that.
Yeah,
it's true.
As long as they're not the kid, you're good.
Something that you touched on that I wanted to bring up about Godkiller was, and when you were talking about how the difficult or dark themes, I remember reading about how some of the abilities require like divine triggers. As in, you need to go, as I understood it, correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but you needed your power couldn't just happen necessarily, but to do it, you had to put yourself through stress or a trigger, and you couldn't stack them multiple times. So I think in that way, part of the design seems to speak to like the intimacy of those dark nature problems. Like you can't bypass them or piggy bank them. Sometimes the move is to deal or exile them, or you know, sometimes you have to face the demons as it were. And I had never seen that. And then I noted that there was also talking about stuff that this game isn't going to be for everybody. I think a large part of that this demographic will immediately X itself out when they get to the page that just talks about safety tools for those right? So like I think you covered your own ass. Like it's not gonna be for everybody because the themes are dark, and I think it requires a certain kind of emotional capacity, and some people just don't have it, and you should market to your audience, right?
yeah, definitely. And my audience is other freaks who love the idea of God killing.
Yes,
and
that's a universal story if I've ever heard
Yes.
one. What the fuck? I think this is a good idea. Where's the problem?
Yeah, and very complicated characters and people who are interested in being challenged and in thinking and like I think decentering themselves in a lot of ways. Which was a really interesting exercise for Last Hope, and creating this story together with C, who is very much they honestly they knocked this story out of the park. I was so blown away by C's performance. Like I wrote the game for C. It's in like the first page of the Ashcan, and it will be on the first page of like the full game itself when it's released by Evil Hat. It says I believe I wrote something like, "This game is for C, the eternal God killer of my heart. Never stop fucking with my plans. I love you." And that is what I mean by a collaborative game master, is I love it when my players fuck with my plans. Like I'll have prep, I'll like plan the idea of an encounter, right? I'll never plan solutions because I want my players to like come up with their own like ideas for how to like address the situation. But I love it when my players like turn my encounter on its head, or they go, "Hey, Connie, can I do this?" And they have that like evil little smirk on their face. You know what I mean? And C. Thomas is the progenitor of that for me. Like they've been fucking with my plan since day one. They are like patient zero for that for me. And the moves I wrote for Godkiller reflect that. The mortal moves are always a give and take. The player answers one of the questions of a mortal move, and the GM answers the other. The player gets to choose first. So the questions are designed in such a way in a mortal move that they will always give you a little bit of a boon and then a little bit of a drawback. So there's no way to do a mortal move without like getting something and then immediately getting hit by a consequence or like encountering an obstacle. And it's up to the player if they want to decide their own obstacle or if they want to decide the reward they get. So that is in and of itself an exercise in trust. as well. So like a player deciding the obstacle is trusting the GM to give them something good as like the boon, and a player deciding the boon is trusting their GM to come up with a fun, exciting, but not too punishing obstacle or challenge for their character, right? So everything in this game is rooted in that intimate duet nature of that give and take, push and shove, and even in the adjudication of the outcomes of divine moves, which you roll for, unlike mortal moves, which you just ask questions and whatnot. There are misses where basically the GM has the most power to decide what happens next. There are overkills, you roll too high, and the Godkiller, you get what you want, but then you get it too much, right? If you inflict violence and you get an overkill, then you go too far, for example. And there's that nice middle ground, right? Which is where you quote unquote want to go, but sometimes getting what you want ends up being the most boring outcome. I've had situations where I've run Godkiller for C and they've just gotten what they wanted, and it's kind of like I was kind of hoping to fail, and that's when I know the game is doing what I want it to do, where players and GMs actively look forward to failing and to not getting immediately exactly what they thought they were going to get, and letting the dice and the game and the system also be a player at the table.
Are there overkills in this game?
Oh yeah,
Are there?
It's so.
Sure.
Are there? I'm not entirely sure.
I thought there was one, maybe.
I think I did. I saw the trailer and all the overkills that were shown there. I think I did like some mathematics on like the odds of an overkill and like what it actually is to occur on 2d6s without any bonuses, without all that, because that can change things. And I'm like, there's too many that's happening. This is insane. This is crazy. I want to know what happened and how C dealt with that, because I was explaining this to Godkiller to someone in the Apocalyptic Discord, Trooper, shout out to Trooper, who was like, hey, Powered by the Apocalypse games, you have to be careful with those because everyone kind of like makes them their darling and like focuses on like things they can just shove the rules into it. And then I showed him like, oh no, look at these overkill rules. And he's like, oh, perfect. Understands completely how to use this system, because in a Powered by Apocalypse games, it's always like, you fail, you succeed, but something kind of bad happens, or you just do it. You kind of just do the like, you fail, you succeed, you do it too damn well. And I'm like, oh, I've never considered too good. What does too good look like? And especially in this game, when you consider you're effectively a demigod. I guess the Godkiller is effectively a demigod, right? I mean, that's one of the backgrounds is godling that you could be. So like, just the idea there is just like, you're a new god, and unfortunately you girl boss too hard, and now everyone's dead.
That you actually hit on something really core to the core mechanics of the game, which is why I introduced overkill in the first place, is for the same reason for all of my design choices, is that it pushes the themes of the game forward. This idea of the responsibility of your power. So yeah, you could not do enough. You could also do too much, right? So like you're too, again, this is not about are you strong enough? You are. Sometimes you're too strong. Sometimes you don't know your own strength, or you don't have enough control over your power, and that's bad too. And I think that's an interesting question that I want to see in more games that deal with questions of power, right? Which is why I like something I really enjoy about Apocalypse Keys by Raid Najati, also published by Evil Hat, is that this idea that they're harbingers of the apocalypse. You're playing a character that could go dark side, and at any moment you could like go dark side, right? So I'm really drawn into mechanics that explore that and that highlight those sides of the themes that they grapple with.
I think it even shows with the overkill and the risk. I believe once you should you even succeed in killing a god, they can curse you at the end, right? There is a final cut scene with these guys, and I think that helps enhance or sweeten the risk, right? If you do overkill, if you do overextend, that final curse. And I remember that standing out to me. Could you talk a little bit about like your design process in including something like that? Because I think some people may feel the temptation to be like, oh, right, we've already talked a lot about how this has to be like a collaborative, intimate thing that you have to trust each other. We've talked about the safety tools already, right? But I think you know, anybody can be like that fear of like, you killed the god and I curse you, like the spite play in killing a boss. Once you ever been playing a game and there's a spite move at the end and it's just like whatever. So I actually wanted to hear a little bit more about how you navigate the nuance of delivering those curses, because I thought that was an interesting mechanic.
Yes. So getting cursed is a mechanic in Godkiller. I'm expanding upon what being cursed can look like for the full game, but in the Ashcan, a curse is always phrased as "thou shalt not blank." So, for example, "thou shalt not experience pleasure," "thou shalt not dream without nightmares," "thou shalt not sleep," "thou shalt not," whatever it might be, depending on the context of how you receive the curse. And you can get cursed by a god if you roll a miss on the Kill a God Crucible move. And very pivotally, the moves for Kill a God and Spare a God, you don't add any modifiers to ever. That is only ever decided by fate. And that was on purpose as well, because I didn't want you to be able to like ever skew the odds in your favor or against you. Like that's just up to the dice, baby. And there's something really sexy about that for me. And if you roll a 6-, you kill the god anyway, because if you're using the move Kill a God, you're killing a god. But they curse you. And the thing about a curse is, and this is something I've expanded upon in the full game that I'm still kind of workshopping out, is there is a very easy way to break it, which is you just do it. Like, as the player, you just do the thing you're cursed not to do. For example, if you're cursed to never experience pleasure, you could say as a character, if you're being intimate with like an NPC that you've like gotten really close to, like, I want to be intimate with you. And I as a GM might say, wait, but you're cursed to never experience pleasure. Are you intimate with them without feeling anything about it? Which is also such a thing. It's like, oh my god, like, do I be intimate with this character and like not feel anything? Right?
Now sexy.
Yeah, now we're talking.
Here we go. Now we're cooking with gas.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. The player could be like, you know what? Fuck it. I want to experience pleasure. Then I'd be like, that's a move. You violate a curse. That's a crucible move. When you violate the terms of a curse, await disaster and answer 1. What shatters beyond repair? What mutates beyond recognition?
Yes.
What shifts beyond your reach? And the GM will answer one other, describing how the curse surges forth to claim its due. So if this happens while you're intimate with someone, like, imagine what could happen because you break the curse. Right?
This is so risky.
Much stuff.
I love it.
And I live for this. I'm chomping at the fucking bars of my enclosure about this, right? And I think that's sexy as hell.
This is what the people want.
Yes. So this game isn't about, it's not a tactical combat game. It's not a game. It's not an adversarial game, because at any point the player can choose to lift their curse. It's just about if they're willing to live with the consequences of it, right? And if you aren't, then there are ways to lift your curse in game, right? It's narratively, right? Like the GM could tell you how, like maybe you have to bathe in a holy spring or something, and that's just, you work it out in the fiction. Or you could get a god to lift it for you, because if you do really well on sparing a god, they will perform a favor of your choosing, and you can have them lift a curse that another god bestowed on you if you so choose. But again, I'm working out like more specific ways that players can like lift their curses in the full game, but this is currently like just the core of it.
That's so fun. That's so fun.
Yeah. I'm always wondering, Connie, what you're working out in real life that comes out to your games, because god damn. Woo! You were just like, I want the world to feel pain, but also love and enjoy. But you gotta suffer first. God damn, that's some heat. Just the idea of like the one thing you have to do to lift your curse is to do the thing. God, that's like everyday life for me. I feel like a lot of people. It's like, the one thing I have to do better is like just do the thing that I'm avoiding, the thing I believe in myself that I can't do or shouldn't do.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, though, maybe I can give a little preview of a new mechanic from the full game that I've been kind of playing with, and this is featured in Last Hope as well, which is. I've got like the document open right now. I'm going to just like crack it open. It's this idea. So we've talked about divine triggers earlier, which is basically a way for you to awaken your divinity. So a divine trigger is just, it's like something you have to do in order to awaken your divinity, which is a mechanic. So, for example, the divine trigger for the wronged is when you turn to violence against someone who slanders or mocks your pain, awaken your divinity, which is great. Makes a lot of sense. Very thematic to the origin, right? Your mortal trigger is a way for you to clear off strain, which is basically like remove all of the harm you've taken, mentally and physically and spiritually. So, for example, the mortal trigger for the wronged is when you share your hidden pain with someone who has broken your trust. Clear off strain. So the player is motivated to play their characters in complicated ways for them to get these like mechanical benefits, right? A crucible trigger, which is a new kind of trigger that I'm currently workshopping and developing for the full game, will basically allow you to choose your doctrine, which is a brand new set of rules, questions, and triggers that will permanently replace your origin. And you don't declare what your doctrine is during character generation. This is something you can only unlock through playing. And I specifically created the mechanic of a doctrine to support longer term play because I was running up against a big design challenge I think a lot of PBTA games have, which is when you've played, for example, Monster Hearts 2 for 30 sessions, you've already unlocked everything there is to unlock with experience. And it feels kind of dull to be playing the same character to the same playbook with the same challenges when you feel like you should be able to grow past those challenges at that point, right? That's one of the fundamental things that I dislike about playbooks, which is why I've also moved away from the language of playbooks for Godkiller in particular and leaned into origins. I think they're great for like very thematic play, maybe like contained miniseries or like a campaign, but like for like campaigns with like dozens and dozens of sessions, I think it can get a little limiting. And that's always been my issue with it as a performer and as a player as well. I feel like a playbook can be rather limiting. So a doctrine is a way to open up what your character is on your own terms. I'm still fleshing out the exact rules with the doctrine, but either way, the crucible trigger is something like this. And this is a new origin that I wrote specifically for Litany of Last Hope. And the name for this origin is the Pawn. The pawn serves the will of a greater power. Your sole purpose is to do as your lord instructs, rarely more and never less. Your only desire is the desire to obey. Your divinity is a vicious and perfect reflection of your lord's design. And your divine trigger is when you risk life or limb to fulfill your purpose, you awaken your divinity. Your mortal trigger is when you indulge a desire that pulls you away from your purpose, you clear off strain. And your crucible trigger, which allows you to abandon your origin and choose a new doctrine, is when you declare what your purpose is beyond what your lord has decreed for you, you choose your doctrine. So immediately you can see that this trigger, theoretically, you could do that session 1. There's nothing stopping the player from just being like, you know what? I'm just going to say that I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm going to lay down my sword and do my own thing. You could theoretically do that session 1. Would it be super fulfilling, though? I'm not sure. Maybe if it was like a one-shot, right? And you talked about it with your GM, right? But crucible triggers are not meant to have a high barrier of entry. In fact, they're meant to have a very low barrier of entry. It's about unlocking an internal metamorphosis for your character. And I think it's kind of like a button that's on your character sheet that like is a big red button that you could push at any time to evolve, right? But you hopefully the rest of the game incentivizes the player and is fun enough for the player to want to interact with that they like choose not to hit the button until they feel like they've earned it. And like that's the point of a crucible trigger, which is featured and comes up during Last Hope.
You ever play Pokemon and know you can like stop the evolution by hitting the B button? Basically, you're hitting the B button all the time, and now it's like, okay, I got to stop it. Okay, hold on. We're running out of time here real quick, but so I want to make sure. Andrew, do you have any questions? Come on, throw something at us.
All right. Actually, I do have one. So I was playing Godkiller just to test play this game because I haven't done that yet, and I reached a weird point where I didn't know what question I wanted to ask because I was so excited about what the other person was going to do with either question. And I just wonder, have you ran into that playing the game?
Absolutely, like all of the time, especially with C. When we're doing mortal moves, I'll read out the text of the move, and then we'll look at the 2 questions, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, which one do you want to answer? And C, I always let my player decide, which is maybe a bit unfair towards C because they have to be the one to make the choice, right? Which can often be a hard choice. But to their credit, C always tends to more often than not, like 90% of the time, have a strong feeling either way. And the other 10% of the time is that they're torn strongly both ways. And that's usually when I step in and I'm like, you know what? Wait, I can come up with an idea for one of them. So I have an idea for how to answer this question if you want to take the other. So it's like a conversation with your partner, right? With your scene partner, with your artistic partner, with your creative partner. You're equals in this process, right? So both of your desires matter. And a lot of this game is about juggling your desires, making sure that they are holding hands, and if they're ever opposed, to be able to have the tools to talk about that and adjudicate that through the system and also above the table.
So cute.
That is the most, no, I don't know, but the most, but it's like one of the most anti-colonial, anti-orientalist like concepts of the game. It's not me versus you, enemy versus monster. You said this earlier, but yeah, that just the collaboration between two people, trying to enjoy each other's company and play a game. I think there's something so beautiful about that communication and that connection that can be built during that game space. That's I feel like that's just the thing that only Connie can bring to the table.
Oh, I appreciate that.
To the space. You know what I'm saying?
And I really could not have done this without C.
Hey,
they are like they're
C.
the epitome of knowing how to fail, like taking the knife that I give them and like stabbing themselves in the back repeatedly with it. They are like a master at it. They're like a genius at it. In fact, maybe I can end this with like a little teaser of like episode 1 of Last Hope. The entire campaign kicks off with a failure. That is the inciting incident of the entire show. It's a monumental, like galactic major fuck up that their character goes through. And it ripples outward for centuries, and it informs every aspect of their character, why they're motivated, their want, struggling up and punching against their needs, and figuring out where to go from being defined as a failure. And I'm really excited for folks to watch Last Hope because in addition to showcasing new mechanics, which are really exciting, that won't be out until like Q1 of 2025 because that's probably when we're going to crowdfund the whole game. It is a love letter from me to C about mortality, divinity, and the razor sharp edges of the cycles of familial grief.
That's beautiful.
I gotta pick your brain about grieving one of these days, Connie, because the way you handle grief.
I have so many
when you come on Nunshot, I'm gonna hit you up on that one because you just do grieving. Sorry, Logan, go in. I'm gonna handle the tech side and you handle the outro.
Okay. Well, okay. Let's wrap this up, everyone. Hello, everyone. We are Melanin and Mythos on the Apocalyptic Unlimited channel here. We have been hosting this wonderful interview with Connie about Godkiller and Godkiller Last Hope and all the. I mean, this has just been a very fun interview. I'm gonna be like, standing in the shower, like, oh man, I should have done that. It's gonna be the whole thing for me. Like tomorrow, I'm just gonna I should have asked that question. But Connie, can you please tell our viewers where can they catch you? What you're all doing? I mean, we've kind of talked about a little bit, but maybe there's some kind of hidden project you want to announce. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello and goodbye, folks. My name is Connie Chang, as you may or may not know. My pronouns are they, he, and she. You can find me across the internet at by Connie Chang, BYCONNIE CHANG. I am the game master and creative producer for Transplaner RPG, which was given such a lovely introduction at the beginning. We're an all transgender, people of color led dark fantasy actual play channel telling stories set in an original non-colonial anti-orientalist multiverse. Our current main campaign is The Chaos Protocol, which follows 3 doomed agents of a secret interplanar agency that takes directions from fate herself as they traverse across the multiverse answering distress calls. We're currently in between arcs, so we just wrapped Arc 2 and we are going to embark Arc 3 probably later this summer or early fall. We've got a lot of wonderful hiatus content planned in the meantime, including the premiere of Godkiller Last Hope, which we've been talking about off stream. This is our first ever in-studio foray. It is a game of Godkiller with myself as the game master and C. Thomas as Litany, the titular Godkiller who has been forged for a single purpose: to slay the immortal Emperor of Heaven, who just so happens to also be their mother's sister. So there's a lot of family trauma, a lot of cycles of grief happening here, cycles of vengeance and rage, love, queer community, and belonging. And coming up this Sunday, we have Hunk Heist, which is an all geese hack of Honey Heist that I wrote that I'll be releasing on Itch after the stream is done. Following a bunch of geese trying to heist something. And C is going to be the GM for that. It's going to be a really chaotic time. We're going to be raising money for Operation Olive Branch in support of the folks of Palestine who are going through a horrifically evil genocide right now at the hands of the IOF. So show up, help us raise some money for Operation Olive Branch. And subscribe to Transplaner on YouTube. That's where all of the VODs of Last Hope are going to come out and where all of the VODs of all of our streams go up eventually. Transplaner RPG. And follow us on Twitter at Transplaner RPG for the latest news and updates, and myself on TikTok and Twitter. That's me. I'll pass it back to y'all.
Woo.
Okay, well, we're Melanin Mythos. You've been listening to us, or you've been seeing our beautiful faces all the time. So I'm just gonna say goodbye. Hi, I'm Logan. I'll talk to y'all later. Who wants to grab it? I'll throw it. I'm gonna throw this. Mark, you take it.
Hey, it's your boy Mark J, and this is my meat. To quote C. Thomas from a long time ago. Jojo.
Yeah, that's me. I wasn't ready. Help! End the stream. This has been great. You can find me on the internet at AnthropoJojo. I am a soon-to-be graduating cultural anthropologist, no longer studying. I have earned my stripes soon. And I help out on the internet and have the great privilege and honor of talking to these wonderful people about the great tapestry we all share, that is storytelling. And then I'm going to pass it over to the man with the brain behind all of this. I'm going to toss this over to the founder here. I'm going to toss it over to the big cheese, Andrew. Take it away.
Yeah, I'm Andrew. I don't know. I just love being here every time. And I get so lost in just listening to all the wonderful things everyone says. So I'm just happy to be part of this. And yeah.
Okay. With that, I think we're gonna head out. Thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you later.
Thanks for having me. Bye, folks.
Bye.